there, my name is Lauren Olson, and I've been part of the Myriad Associates Grants team since 2018, and I'm here to talk about grants and got a few questions to answer, and we'll see how it goes. Sure. So prior to joining Myriad, I worked mainly for technology companies. My background is mainly in technical writing with some creative writing. So I worked for companies like Experian, writing documents and other types of information. I joined in 2016 as a technical consultant slash technical writer, which meant I was handling research and development tax credit claims in the UK and Ireland. When Mark Graytrix joined the company in 2018, he started the grants division, and probably September 2018, something around there, he sent me a Horizon 2020 proposal to evaluate, just to look at and to see if I understood what the technology was and if it was clear, if it met the evaluation criteria that they would be judged on. And from there, I picked up other projects, and eventually the balance of my work shifted from the R&D tax credit side to grants. There's not really one particular area. I do tend to specialize in things like cell and gene therapy. If we have a project that comes across in that area, then I tend to be the first person to take a look at that because I've done a couple of projects in that area and it's very interesting to me. But also, I've done some of the invasive heart and brain projects, things dealing with atrial fibrillation or stroke. Also, projects dealing with crystal structure prediction, which has to do with molecules and which form of their structure is the best for stability when in drug development, thumb implants and infant brain screening. Basically anything that I learn something new is the type of project that I like, and there's a lot I don't know, so there's a lot for me to learn. The first thing that I think is the most important is being curious about the way that the world works. So, not only wanting to learn new things, but also being willing to say, I don't understand that. I want to learn more about that, but also that you're willing to ask for help and find out, from somebody who's an expert in that area and be able to ask questions to figure out some of those areas you don't understand. One thing that's important is having a kind of system for staying organized, which we all do it differently in terms of the team. Some people keep it more in their head, some people keep it like I have, checklists and to-do lists and that kind of thing, which is how I work. But as long as you have a system, whatever it is, that's really critical to keeping on top of different projects and different deadlines and that kind of thing. You have to, it's kind of obvious, but you have to be able to write a decent narrative that basically you can summarize the logic of a particular solution by talking about what the problem is, how big it is, how does this particular solution fix it, and what does that mean in terms of impact on the stakeholders in that area, how it impacts the world at large, how it impacts from a sustainability point of view, that kind of thing. You have to also be able to understand the basics of company financials and fundraising stages and how a profit and loss statement works, which is, for me, that's not my background. So that's something that I'm always trying to learn a little bit more about. And each project with each company, because it's a little bit different, you learn a little bit more about that every time. And then you need the support of a strong team because you can't write these things on your own. You need somebody to check something to say, does this make sense? But also, if you get stuck where you're looking at something and you've been working on it for weeks, sometimes you can't figure out what the next thing that needs to happen is. So being able to pass things over and provide things to other people for their feedback and review is really important. So for me, the best thing is getting new types of technologies funded, especially those that haven't had as much focus as they should have in the past or are completely new. So, for example, from the FemTech perspective, we had a project with Avita Medical, which was funded through the Horizon Europe EIC Accelerator. There was a project dealing with DNA data storage, which prior to that project, I didn't even know that you could store data on DNA. That was HelixWorks technology, and they were funded through a Horizon Europe EIC transition project. Projects like Loci Orthopedics, and that one deals with a thumb implant. And the difficulty with current state of the art thumb implants is that they don't mimic the way that the thumb actually moves. So Loci had come up with a system for mapping the way that the thumb moves and was able to get EIC accelerator funding for that. Cell and gene therapy is the area that I specialize in. So we had both ONK Therapeutics and Avectis, which were funded through the Irish government's Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, which both of those projects were dealing with creating new ways of doing therapies for cancer. A number of things that go into the decision. The first thing is, does the innovation or the technology excite us? When we read about it, do we say, ooh, I didn't know that was possible, or I wasn't aware that this was something? The other side of that is, and especially for any type of grant application, is even if it's exciting, it also has to be in some way new. So we look around to figure out if somebody else has already done this, if there's already some IP or published papers in this area, to see if this is something that hasn't been done before, because that's key to being able to write a good application. Being able to work well with the client is really important, because these projects take time and you're building a relationship. Of course, the initial application process may take several weeks or several months, depending on how involved it is. But you get through that process, you may have an interview to get through and to prep the client for. So that's some more time. Then obviously, when the client is successful, there's the process of grant preparation, which may mean answering questions, making sure that everything's in the way that the grant funding body needs it to be. And from that point, you're also following how the company is progressing with the grant. So it's not simply a one-off process and then you just move on to the next thing. You're actually building relationships with these clients over time. And that means that you need to be able to work closely with them, and you need to be able to communicate, from their side and from our side, to be able to say, this is a problem, we need to fix this, or this isn't working, we need to fix this. You have to be able to have that communication in place. Occasionally I would say probably more on the medical device side of projects that we tend to work on, we have to determine if there's a conflict of interest with the project that we've worked on before, because obviously you can't forget the things that you learned from a previous project, and we don't want to blur the lines there in terms of information that we wrote for a previous project being employed in a new project if it deals with a company's particular IP or their particular approach. And really, from there, it's about checking the logic of the problem and the solution. So can we, if we take, a single sheet of paper, write that down and make that logic clear for somebody who doesn't have any experience with that area? Because when you're looking at evaluators for whether it's EIC Accelerator or some of the country-specific grant funding programs, the people who are evaluating the projects will have expertise in particular areas, but it may not necessarily match up to what the project is. So you have to be able to explain it in a way that's concise and clear for everybody who is reading it. And then basically once we get to that point and we've figured out, okay, yes, we can talk about that, then it's something that we talk about as a team to figure out, do we have capacity to work on this? Where does it fit into our schedule? Does that fit with what the client's looking for in terms of timelines? And decide from there. Personally, femtech projects for sure are something that, like I said before, they haven't been funded that frequently, and it's past time for that to change. We just don't tend to get a lot of them across our desks. We've gotten, a few that once in a while something comes through, but it's just not very common at the moment. So if somebody out there has got some of those projects, then let us know, because that would definitely be something we'd be interested in evaluating. Basically, for me, if there is a picture that somebody would look at and say, "Ooh, that's gross," I will probably say, "Ooh, that's gross. I want to take another look at it. I want to see what that is closer." We'll probably see some changes in terms of more UK companies applying for Horizon Europe. And just from the perspective of team growth, basically, we're at the point where we're lucky enough to have a good group of clients and a good pipeline. So it's now about picking the projects that interest us the most and being able to make sure that we're picking winning projects and can bring them through the process. But just in terms of, I suppose, geographically, where we're located, Helen and Rockman and Mark are all located in the UK. I lived in the UK, but I now live in the US. So if you need a grant writer at 3 in the morning in Europe, I'm probably the person you will be talking to.